Let's get started in Illustrator. So today you're going to start creating a name design, and I give you specifically what needs to be in this project. You want to create an 11 by 17 or a 17 by 11. You can decide as long as you use those dimensions. The file should be RGB color mode, and you're going to want to set up your workspace with the panels and toolbars that will most likely be necessary. So you'll want to make sure tools are open, ruler is open, layers is open, and you're going to create 2 layers. So once you create your file, you are going to want 2 official layers, and the layers tend to work like folders. One should be named foreground and one should be named background. Your name design will go in the foreground, meaning the front of the design, and whatever environment or added elements for background should go in the background layer. So let's get started. First of all, I did give you 2 samples just for viewing to see different approaches. The student's actual letters of her name are in the foreground, everything else background. And notice, these are not typed letters. We are not using the type tool. You are drawing the letters yourself. So you might use the paintbrush. You might use some pre-created shapes. That's really up to you. But let's jump into the program and get started. Okay, so we're in Illustrator, and I did open this file just to break it down for you. And then we will go through how to get started. First of all, if you see the layers panel here on the right, if for some reason you didn't see the layers panel, let me close it. If you didn't see it, remember you can always go into Window and you can look for whatever it is that you need. So there's layers, and notice there's a shortcut F7, but layers is under Windows, and you can place it wherever you need or find it easily accessible. And we have our tools and we have our options. Okay, you want that toolbar across the top in case there are features of a tool and maybe you don't know that they're there. So if you click on a tool, any tool you click on, you should see different options showing up at the top. Of course, as I tell you to do that, we're not seeing. Oh, now we're seeing it. So I've clicked on the gradient tool here, click on the paintbrush. So some tools will have changes in this toolbar, more options. But the toolbar is actually called Control. I keep referring to it as Options, but it's your Control toolbar. So if you find that it's empty at the top of the program when you first open it, let's go to Window and click on Control. As long as you have your Tools toolbar, your Control panel or Control toolbar, and your Layers panel, you're good to start with. Okay, now you'll notice I have my ruler open across the top and down the side. That helps me in deciding maybe a balance, placement of objects, lets me know if I have my file the correct size. I can see this file that I created is not the size I'm asking you to create, so I will show you how to get there. If your ruler's not open, think of a ruler as something you can see or view, so click on the View down and go down to Rulers. Right now it says Hide Rulers because of course they were already open. So you would go to View, Rulers, and Show Rulers. Excuse me. Okay, let's continue. Now, there is a shortcut for rulers as well. You can do Command R to close or Command R to open, and if you're on your laptop or any PC, it would be Control R. So the difference between using a Mac and using a PC is the controller. You would use Command S to save on a Mac or Control S to save on a PC. And as we learn our shortcuts, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Notice over here in Layers, I have what they're calling layers. I would describe them as folders. everything you create is considered a path, and all paths, every time you create a path, it shows up independently. So all the paths that create the background design should be in one layer. All the paths that create the foreground design or your name should be in another layer. So to create layers, when you're in the layers panel, you can go down to this plus sign in the bottom right corner and simply click, and it makes a new one. You want to label it, double click on the layer 3 in this case, whatever the default name is, and we could call this foreground, background, whatever is appropriate, and that is what's appropriate for this assignment. Notice there's no arrow here to open, and that's because nothing is created on that layer. If I simply create something, we'll just draw a little shape on the side. Once I created that shape, now my new foreground layer does have an arrow to open. There just had been no contents yet. So I'm going to just get rid of that because we don't need to see it. Let's get you started. So File, New. And of course, you're always going to see some pre-formatted sizes. I really prefer to create my own sizes, especially you'll want to know how, because I'm going to give you certain sizes depending on what we're working on. You'll probably default to pixels as your unit of measure. It may even show points as your unit of measure because we are more familiar with inches as our unit of measures. I always give our dimensions in inches. So the size I asked for was 11 by 17 or 17 by 11. I'm going to do 17 inches wide and 11 inches of height or tall. Once I put those dimensions in, I can always just switch the orientation from the portrait to landscape. I'm working in landscape. We only need one artboard for now. And the only other setting I required was for you to set the color mode. We've talked only briefly so far about the difference. The basic difference for RGB color, which is red, green, blue, that is based on creating the artwork digitally. And if the artwork is staying digital, meaning seen through electronic device, RGB would be what we will always default to. If you knew for sure you were sending something for a print, CMYK would traditionally be your color mode for print. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and the K stands for black. We'll talk about that again at another time. So just set your color mode to RGB. 17 by 11 inches and RGB color mode, create. Okay, now I'm going to zoom out, Command minus. If you need to zoom out, you can zoom out as much as you want. Just keep pressing Command minus or zoom back in with Command plus. Okay, now how can I verify my measurement? I could simply open those rulers, Command R, and look at that. If I just sort of scroll up, I can see the left starts at 0, and I've gone to 17 wide, and I'm starting at 0 at the top, and it looks like I've gone to 11 high. I have the actual accurate size. And I have one layer in my layers panel. I'm going to add a second. One of them I will call background, and one of them I will call foreground. Now, let's very quickly go through background, foreground. I'm just going to fill my background with a solid color for the moment. So I double clicked on this fill color box. I'm going to pick any color from here in the center, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick the tint or the shade that I want to use. I just want to fill the background for demonstration purposes. So to fill the whole rectangle, I use a rectangular, pre-created shape. I'm just coming to the top. I'm going to click and drag down. And there we go. And you see how it's shown up in foreground. For background, very quickly, I'm just going to swap the colors, and I'll use the color black for, actually with the paintbrush, I can leave black where it is. It's going to pick from here. And let me just make this stroke or line thicker. And let's see. I'm just going to draw a nice capital D for my name. Oh, look at that. But it went into the foreground layer. Well, that was a mistake. Now, I could just select that path and delete it, backspace delete, or I just undid that command by clicking Command Z. Command Z will undo, or you can go to Edit, Undo. Or I could click on the D and drag it to the background, but that makes no sense because the letter is supposed to actually be in foreground. I'm just messing it all up so you know how to correct yourself. So I'm going to undo again and put my letter, Command Z, come on now. Well, Command Z won't undo that move, so I'm going to drag it back up. And this time I'm going to put the rectangle in the background. So now we actually have the letter in the foreground and the solid color in the background. Okay, and what I just clicked on is the eyeball, or what is allowing me to see the work. So if I happen to put foreground layer below background, watch what happens. I'm dragging it down. Now I don't see it, and that is because the order of layers over here in the layer panel, think of the lower layers as further away and the layers on top as closer. So if that background box is closer, it's hiding the layer, the imagery in my foreground layer. So I'm going to drag it back up so I can see it. Okay. This is just a quick orientation so that you can get started. You might not finish your design today, and that is fine. Another thing that will be very handy for you is if you want to make sure that you're working on the right layer, if you're working on your name, you could just turn the background layer off. Or if you've created some design elements in the background so you really want to be able to see them while placing your letters, lock the layer. So in this box to the right of the eyeball, just click on the lock and make sure, of course, you've selected the correct layer to work on. So I'm going to work on foreground. I've selected it and I've locked the background. Okay. So you might have noticed when I did the rectangular shape in the background, let me just grab another color. Okay, when I did the rectangular shape, it automatically filled with color, just like this star filled with color just now. And that star I've got on my foreground layer. Okay, and just for consistency, I'm going to drag that to the background, lock my foreground layer, and just work on the background layer. This way, I can have that star maybe rest behind my letter as well. A solid shape, meaning a shape that starts and stops, so it closes, you can have that automatically assigned or filled with a color. But let's say I take the paintbrush and, oh, my hand's not so steady. I'm using a touchpad to demonstrate. Ooh, that is possibly the worst star I've done. Well, I just drew that. And if I wanted to fill that with color, first thing, I need the bucket, and it's not a normal bucket. I need the live paint bucket. And of course, I need to pick a color. Let's pick that yellow again, or gold. And you'd think I could come over here and simply click, but if you notice, that bucket icon has a circle with a line through it, and I'm clicking inside this star and nothing's happening. That's because the shape is not closed. So first, I'm going to grab this white arrow or direct select tool, and I'm going to zoom way in on this very unstructured star. And when I hover over the line or path, you see how these white dots show up. These are anchor points. And we're going to learn a lot more about those anchor points. But you need to be able to click on a point and connect it with another to close the shape. In all best cases, I should be able to grab that live paint bucket now and pick a color. Oh, look at that. I didn't even need to click in the space. It's simply filled. So you want your elements to be closed if you want them filled with color. If you don't want them filled with color, that's not an issue. But you also, oh, let me click OK here. I'm just going to drag some straight line segments here. And notice everything that's been created so far. You see it. It's placed itself into whatever the appropriate layer is. So the two stars that are part of the background, those are in the background folder. Foreground is not selected and it's locked. Let's create a letter. Here, we're going to switch now. We're going to lock the background, unlock the foreground, and I'm going to create a free, not free form, but oh, come now, a letter A. Let's assign color. And here we're going to start that over again. Click, drag, click, and it's trying to move for me. We don't want that to keep happening. We'll just do it with the paintbrush. Life is easier. Okay. All right. I have some lines created that are consistent. Okay. And maybe we want to have the hole in here. Now, what I'm going to do is, if you've got shapes, letters, elements that go in your design that are not necessarily just filling with color, there are a lot of lines, but you want to fill the spaces with color, grab your selection tool, click on those lines. So that selected one line. I'm going to hold the Shift key down to select more than one line. And you know you've selected it if you see how it's highlighted in red now. And I want to include this shape in the middle, so I'm going to hold Shift and select that shape as well. Now I'm going to go back, get my live paint bucket, and let's pick a different color. And I'm going to hover over the space I want to fill and click. Now it's telling me that the lines I created are complex, and if I fill it with this live paint bucket, it's going to change the attributes of the line. It probably will just make it thinner. I can thicken it up. So I'm going to click OK. And look at that. So now that space I've created by using different paths or lines, I'm allowed to fill it with the live paint bucket. So you can create closed shapes and automatically assign a fill color. You can create spaces by outlining and filling spaces with color using your live paint bucket. For today, to get yourself started, I would just start creating a design, creating how your letters would look. This will at least be in the back of your mind on how to apply color, but you do not have to have it finished today. And keep in mind, you may have an entire design created, but still have some touches that you want to change. And the beauty of the computer is you go back, select your elements, and let's just say you want to even try a gradient at some point. Right now, that's just going to fill solid. I'm going to grab a gradient right from here for demonstration, but we can go through next time how to actually create a gradient. Or if you're really motivated, you could do a Google search for how to create gradients in Illustrator. So this should be enough to get you started for class today.